let's bring on the great Viva Frei. Viva, thank you for joining us, sir.
Yes, my apologies earlier. I didn't realize that you could actually hear the audio in my browser. I was trying to find the link to share with my community. But that was you that you heard while I was pulling up the CommiTube link.
Nothing scarier, honestly. Get it out. Okay, Viva, you were the perfect person to run down this story. I've seen you talk about it online, on Twitter. We've had a lot of great people in the chat over the year bring the story up about this ostrich farm under siege. It's been going on, I think, since the end of last year. You started following it, I believe, around the same time. Can you walk us through what the heck is going on and what happened this weekend?
So I had to double check as to when I initially got wind of this story, and Grok told me my first tweet was December 31st, but the earliest videos I could see were in January, where I got wind of this story where out of Edgewood, British Columbia, a farm called Universal Ostrich Farm, which had, at the time, it was 397 ostriches. They allegedly, there was an outbreak of the avian flu. I say allegedly because the only tests that ever confirmed it were 2 anal swab PCR tests on 2 carcasses of the ostriches in December 2024. And the dates are critical to understand just how insane, absurd, and atrocious a slaughter was 11 months after the initial infection. There was an infection in December 2024. 60 some odd ostriches died, the rest survived. What's truly shocking or astonishing is that this is according to the court documents, the federal court judgment that came out in April, whatever. So I'm going by juridical facts, which I don't believe for a second, but those are the juridical facts.
Right.
Allegedly, the ostriches became infected with H5N1 by a group of passing ducks that landed in a pond and got the ostriches sick. Before the farm even knew what was happening, a whistleblower, an anonymous caller, called the CFIA, which is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Bear in mind, this ostrich farm is not for human consumption. It's not for meat. There's an anonymous tip, like 2 or 3 days into this infection, from a group of ducks that flew over the farm. The CFIA comes in and says, "You're infected. We're going to kill all of the ostriches, every single last one on this farm." The farm, Universal Ostrich Farm, they contest it. We have these basically Soviet-style administrative bodies, and the CFIA is one of them. It's the government sets up these administrative tribunals, administrative bodies that have their own expertise, and the courts are deferential to the purported expertise of these Soviet-style agencies.
Of course.
CFIA says kill them all. They take it. They contest that decision. They get an interim injunction to prevent the kill, and they go to the federal court, lower level, April. The federal court judge ratifies the decision of the CFIA because it says, look, we're deferential to these administrative bodies, their purported expertise, and unless it's patently unreasonable, manifestly unjust, we defer to their better discretion. We're 5 months out of the initial outbreak. These birds have been healthy now for, at the time, December to January, February, March, April, like 4 or 5 months. Federal court says, no, go through with it. They then appeal to the Court of Appeal. They get another interim stay protecting the birds. They get to the Court of Appeal in Ottawa, Federal Court of Appeal, in August. It's a unanimous decision of the Court of Appeal, same rationale. It's an administrative body. The government's granted them their expertise. They said kill the birds because they're a health risk contagion to the rest of Canada, and then they get the authorization to kill them. They appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. This is in August, give or take September. Supreme Court issues an interim protective order. You can't kill the birds until the Supreme Court decides whether or not to take up the case. If they take it up, the protective order stays in effect until the Supreme Court adjudicates. And if they don't, end of the road, they can get killed. So literally, for the better part of the last year, I've had Katie passing it on. She's the daughter of the farm owner. I've been looking into this. It's an ostrich farm, which was once upon a time open to the public. Once upon a time, they might have actually farmed ostriches. COVID comes around, they get shut down. Nobody's open to the public anymore. They do, if you want to go through the pharma angle to this, because I genuinely believe that this has been a big pharma heist to slaughter these animals that had scientific value. In 2021, they started researching on these birds to see if they had any COVID antibodies. And they allegedly they did.
Whoa.
So 2024 comes around, they get infected with whatever. The only 2 tests determining any birds were ever sick were anal swab PCR tests, and everybody knows how notoriously false positive they are. Yep. Cycle rate to 40, give or take, and people know what that means. It's an insane cycle rate. The CFIA never tested any of the other birds on the farm. And not only did they not test any of the other birds on the farm, they got a court order to the effect that anybody who did would be susceptible of contempt and a fine of up to $200,000 and jail of up to 6 months per test on the birds. So the farm was legally prohibited to test the birds to even see if they were even sick, which they weren't, because they were healthy for 11 months after the initial outbreak.
That's insane.
It's insane. So what happens about a month and a half ago is after the Federal Court of Appeal dismissed it, the CFIA basically comes down on the farm looking to murder. It's an animal, looking to slaughter.
Right.
And they get this interim protective order, but while the interim protective order is in effect and until the Supreme Court decides whether or not they take the case up, the CFIA, under the Gestapo Nazi supervision of the RCMP, and I'm calling them the RCMG, it's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, it's the Royal Canadian Mounted Gestapo.
Right.
They're building a kill pen. So they're literally constructing 3 bales of hay wide, 4 bales of hay high, 20 feet high, with like platforms on top of the kill pen so they can slaughter all of these ostriches.
On the property?
On the property of the farm. So the CFIA has come in with a custody order saying, we now have custody of your ostriches. They occupied the farm for 40 plus days. They occupied the neighboring property. They were setting up a checkpoint, basically. Anybody coming on and off had to pass through an armed checkpoint of the RCMG. And while we were waiting for the Supreme Court to either take up the decision or not, they built their kill pen. Wow. They tortured the ostriches. In the meantime, one of them died, an ostrich named Spirit. And she died because she was not being hydrated properly. She was not being fed properly. And the CFIA terrorists are in there. There was a 5-minute video. It was one of the only times where anyone from the farm could see the ostriches. The owner's like, this ostrich looks dehydrated. Has she been drinking? And the guy's like, I don't know, we put some water out. And he says, I'm going to suggest to you she hasn't been drinking. Her beak is dry. It has dirt on her beak. It's clear she hasn't been drinking. You have no idea who's been drinking that water because other ostriches have been in here. What's her temperature? He says, well, we think her temperature is 37.5. And he's like, how do you know? He says, well, a visual. And he looks at the guy's like, you determined her temperature by looking at her?
Wow.
And he's like, yeah. And you see this guy like, anyway, that ostrich died. Wow. After being tortured, dehydrated, starved to death by the CFIA under their custody. We don't know how many other ostriches died because in the 40 days, the number dwindled from 330, which was the number they should have had in their custody, to barely over 200, if you could count that. This is where it gets really horrible. I've been covering this story since literally January. I've been trying to get some of the biggest eyeballs on it. I'm not saying this with any blame, and there's no pointing fingers, period. The world is crazy. There's more crisis than we even know what to deal with. And, the story got some traction. I never actually thought they would follow through with the slaughter. I thought there'd be a happy ending. I thought the Supreme Court would take it up and spank some people for the egregious overreach, for the insanity of the trust the science to kill these birds because they were infected 11 months ago. And now they're totally healthy. They've been healthy for 11 months. To kill them because the order in December made sense in December as though it makes sense in November a year later. The Supreme Court on Thursday comes down with a 1-paragraph case dismissed. We're not taking it up. Wow. And like horny fucking teenagers just waiting to lose their virginity, the CFIA went in there the same day and literally started slaughtering them that night. I mean, it's like, and it's a crass analogy, and I apologize for it, but that's what it was like.
Yeah.
It was like someone being told, you get to go lose your virginity now, and like horny teenagers, they went into this kill pen looking to slaughter. That night, without any warning to anybody, bear in mind, Katie Pazitny, the daughter of the farm owner, is there. The mother's there. Her business partner, Dave, is there. There's hundreds of protesters there, children there, people. Without any warning whatsoever, the RCMP, the RCMG, who set up their kill pen, they just start sniping these birds. Over the course of 8 hours, like volley after volley, there were something like 900 to 1,000 shots fired. They slaughtered each and every one of those ostriches.
It seemed like they took joy in it. Honestly, like the footage is, like the photos I've seen are insane. And honestly, I don't want to compare animals to humans, but it did remind me of things that do happen at war, such as like the decapitation races that Japan was doing to China. People who just take joy in insane violence. And you got to like these people were watching those ostriches for 40 days, you said, and then is it those people who turn on them, or they bring in the guys with the guns? They're like, all right, just have fun now.
We don't know, but by the way, there's nothing unfair about comparing life to life. Like,
Right.
yes, human life is higher order than ostriches,
For sure.
but serial killers start with animals. I mean, it's sociopaths start with animals, and you can judge a society by how they treat their animals. I think it's Mahatma Gandhi. It was not just pleasure. Like, the whole thing is when the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and its president, Paul McKinnon, we shall never forget their names. When they wanted to pretend it was a health hazard, they put on their fucking balloon hazmat suits, and they go in there like, oh, we gotta wear our hazmat suits when we're feeding them water. The snipers weren't wearing hazmat suits. When they were bulldozing their dead bodies out of there, nobody was wearing hazmat suits. They literally spread the blood-soaked hay across the neighboring properties. They literally lifted the carcasses. They were sitting on the property for at least a day and a half, 2 days, rotting for any vulture, for any bird, for any scavenger to come through, and if they were in fact a health hazard, to spread that health hazard. They've been sitting now at this, I forget what it's called, I don't want to get the name of the business wrong, whoever had the containers, they're rotting in these boxes at this storage unit, and they were, had to be slaughtered because they were such a health risk to spread the H5N1, so they decided to spread their guts, blood, and gore all over the property, with no hazmat suits for any of the cops dealing with this, for the snipers. It was orgiastic slaughter of life for the sake of it, because that's what a tyrannical government does. Yep. It never admits it was wrong. It never comes back and says, we'll rethink it never lets the people win. Yep. And they went in and they slaughtered these animals. I was on the phone with Katie while I heard gunshots in the back and a woman sobbing, losing everything she ever knew. Goodness. She had, some of the ostriches had been in the family for 35 years.
Wow.
Wow. They slaughtered all of them in the most vicious, inhumane way possible. For those who don't know, ostriches are like 350 pounds. Right, unless you shoot them through the cranium, you're not killing an ostrich with one shot. When you start firing rounds, and they had them in their kill pen, they all go nuts. After 40 days of torture, they're bouncing off the hay walls. 900 to 1,000 shots for at most 300 ostriches, and there were far less than that. I've got a theory. It was slaughter, gratuitous slaughter, and the way they did it so that everybody out there had to hear gunshots going off one after the other, literally taking their livelihood from them, taking their animals from them. Mm-hmm. It was animal abuse. It was animal torture. It was psychological abuse. It was Waco level, Ruby Ridge level madness.
That's what I was thinking.
You got these effing liberal. The liberals are the new. I mean, they are the new Nazis, and I'm done. Weighing words. When you kill people because they're mentally ill, or because they're infirmed, or because they're schizophrenic, when you have 60,000 people that you've killed under euthanasia in 8 years, you are literally modern day Nazis, and they're out there rejoicing in this. It had to be done for health, for public health, while they're dragging their blood-soaked carcasses around, letting scavengers get to them for 3 or 4 days, torturing everybody involved.
So let's go back to this anonymous tip, and you said that there's maybe a pharma angle. Do you see a connection now between the pharma angle of this and that anonymous call?
Well, so I've been railing against. Do you guys know who Pierre Poilievre is?
Not much. I know the name, probably because yeah.
I say the so-called opposition leader of the so-called Conservative Party of Canada.
Yes.
The man who lost the last election, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yep.
Because he's a goddamn coward.
Right.
He's a goddamn political opportunist who doesn't say what needs to be said because he thinks it's going to be more popular to, he'll get elected by being more liberal than the liberals. Well, that didn't work out. He hasn't said a goddamn thing, and I apologize for taking the Lord's name in vain. He hasn't said a gosh forsaken thing. And I said, and it was so egregious. Like by and large, they were mine, but other people as well. Every top reply to every post he put on Twitter was, what about the ostriches? What about the ostriches? He said, jack squat. And then he finally got one question that he couldn't avoid. What do you have to say about the ostriches? And then he pivots like a flipping coward. Well, it's just another example of the liberal incompetence that we have to now do. Not a word about it.
Wow.
And I was like, this is egregious. This is in your face. And the only explanation is that Big Pharma is involved, and he cannot speak out against this. Now, going all the way back to the beginning, 2021, there was an article that said they may have, discovered, or they're researching antibodies that might fight COVID. My view is that this was clearly a Big Pharma-induced slaughter and theft, because it's going to sound maybe paranoid and delusional and conspiracy theory.
You're on the right show.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. Like, conspiracy theorists have been more right than CNN and MSNBC for the last 10 years.
Yep.
The number of the ostriches since the CFIA took custody has dwindled radically. You could look at it. There were not 330 ostriches in there after the slaughter, and there had not been 330 ostriches in there since they took custody. The number was dwindling more and more and more. At the beginning, the farm owners had more hens to roosters. It's females to males. Mm-hmm. Over the course of it, blue bins were coming in and out. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew where they were going. Nobody could really get anything because, you know, the Gestapo agents, they like to operate under anonymity. So they were taking off identifying plates on vehicles. They weren't showing their names on their badges, whatever. Over the course of 40 days, it's undeniable that the number went down. And it is also equally undeniable from what I'm told on the ground that by the end of it, there were more roosters to hens. Scientifically, the hens are worth more than the roosters because they reproduce. Right. And look, my underlying theory is that they were either killing and removing or taking living hens out to do whatever research the farm was doing on them for the behest of Big Pharma. After the slaughter, they're taking the eggs of the ostriches off the farm, confiscating the eggs. That has nothing to do with alleged H5N1. Right. And if the H5N1 were the concern in all of this, well, then the Canadian government just went ahead and spreaded all that H5N1 juice and fluids all over the ground. I sincerely believe that this was something of a pharma heist. The CFIA works in tandem with a number of pharmaceutical companies, and they stole whatever scientific research of value they had there. Or RFK Jr. in America said, we believe there's scientific value to these ostriches. Let us take them. Dr. Ross said, we'll even put them up on a ranch in Florida. And the CFIA said, 2 middle fingers to the Trump administration. And I was begging the Trump administration to impose retaliatory tariffs to save the birds.
Right.
They fucking slaughtered all of them. Retaliatory tariffs to punish that terrorist government that is the Canadian government. They slaughtered whatever scientific value the world could have benefited from.
Right.
I'm convinced they stole it for the sake of their big pharma friends that they have a vested interest with. I'm convinced the conservatives are involved in it, which is why Pierre, I call him mouse fart Poilievre, because he didn't say a damn. He was quieter than a mouse fart. I'm convinced he's in on that, which is why he could not say anything about this. And they actually went in and did the unimaginable. They slaughtered each and every remaining ostrich, one by one, bullets in the night, let their carcasses sit out there. Apparently they beheaded a bunch of them for whatever the reason, because apparently they were like, you know, you could hear the birds screaming in pain, and some of them didn't get killed quite so quickly. So the operating theory is that they might have gone through the next day, and whichever ones were still alive, they heard sporadic gunshots and, you know, swift decapitations.
Oh my goodness.
And it's an abject atrocity.
What's the public sentiment like up there? Do you know?
Well, I mean, I can only tell you what I see from Florida because
right.
I live in Florida. I don't even want to go back to that country for Christmas. Yeah. We're dealing with it with literally a terrorist government, and we're dealing with literally a terrorist Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And people are going to think I'm being hyperbolic and I'm being bombastic. And this is the same RCMP that when I was documenting the Ottawa trucker protest, were beating the shit out of veterans. That's right. Literally, Deerling, Chris Deerling, a veteran. Yeah. He's a man who's 110 pounds wet. He had his body blown up in Iraq or Afghanistan. I forget where he served. And they beat him up. He lost his medal, his medallion, his medals of honor, what he had on his chest. Right. They handcuffed him, left him in the cold for 3 hours, and then bring him out of the city of Ottawa and then let him, uncuff him and say, make your way back. Remember when that old Indigenous lady was knocked over by the horses and she was nearly killed? The RCMP, among private text messages, were rejoicing in it, laughing about it, saying we should try that maneuver more often. Wow. They were saying like, save some protesters for me. Wait until they hear our jackboots on the ground. This is the RCMP. It's a terrorist organization. It is the militarized branch of a terrorist government. And now they're sitting there purportedly keeping the peace. And I'm gonna troll them until they block me on Twitter. Like, when keeping the peace looks like what we just witnessed, you're not on the side of peace. You are on the side of state-funded terrorism by the definition of the state itself.
And they're sending a message. They're like, this is what will happen to you at some point.
They're going to say, this is, you have no rights to property. You will own nothing and be happy. Yep. And by the way, if your dog crosses the line, we'll fucking shoot your dog as many times as it takes to kill him.
Look, I'm a refugee from New York, which is sometimes like Canada. And before I left New York, and it was during lockdowns, they were trying to pass a law that would make it okay for the state to deem you a health risk to your community, and that they could come to your house and take you in New York. So I was like, we got to get out of here. This is insane. But this is terrifying stuff.
But most people don't realize, like, countries have quarantine acts. And when COVID first hit, and I discovered we had a quarantine act that was amended in 2001, the power it gives to the state is absolute. And they declare an area, a contaminated area, it's theirs.
Yep. They
declare entities, animal or human, vectors of disease, they become property of the state. And people are like, oh, well, it's hyperbolic. Some people are saying this is what they wanted to do to the unvaccinated during COVID. You're literally one step away from it. When they took the unvaccinated and said you're going to quarantine hotels, we're going to tax the unvaccinated. I mean, that's just one step before saying they're an existential threat to the rest of society. We need to put them down.
Has anything like this happened in Canada before? This kind of culling?
In my life, I mean, there have been countless chicken culls.
Right.
And people say, well, you don't care about the chicken culls. First of all, chicken that's intended for human consumption, I don't agree with it. I think it's all a big fat effing lie. Mm-hmm. At the very least, that fits within the purview of the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Right.
And I don't agree with it. Chickens, you get compensated for the price of a chicken. And chickens are animals that live, I don't know, a couple of years? I mean, a couple of years before you kill them at most.
Right.
These ostriches weren't for human consumption. They weren't accessible to the public. And if the rationale is that, well, wild birds can come in contact with them and spread it, well, you're going to kill pretty much every bird in Canada. Yeah. And if the rationale is it doesn't matter how long they've been healthy for after infection, they need to be killed. We're not talking science anymore. We're talking punishment.
Sorry, continue.
No, that was it. Go for it.
I was going to say, does the family have any recourse now? Like, can they even do anything after all this? If it's gone to the Supreme Court already?
Well, this is the doom pill. I don't think so. Once they got the green, the green pass or the slip from the Supreme Court, mm-hmm. The only thing is maybe they didn't follow their own protocol for humane euthanizing of animals. Like maybe they violated their own protocol. But the family is destroyed. The farm is killed. Mm-hmm. The business is over, and there are people who are traumatized for life. Nothing can undo this. And some people say, well, they'll get compensation. They're going to get compensation for the price of a chicken for each of those ostriches. This was a life business, life animals that the government, for no reason other than stubborn tyranny, said, we're going to come in and kill them no matter what you do. And we're going to do it in the most brutal, heinous, inhumane way possible. I saw some of the pictures.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. I mean, look, I've asked the RCMP because some of them look like they were decapitated. Why would they have been decapitated? Why were some of these look like they've been shot through the leg, through the chest? Why were they sitting out there for an extended period of time for any scavenger to come pick apart and carry whatever vectors of disease they claimed to have? There was no science about it. And they did it. And they're going to get away with it. And as I followed the story, I was like, there's going to be a happy ending. The analogy that I always use is like, you've seen Braveheart, and at the end of Braveheart, when they get William Wallace up and they tie him up, and you say like, oh, something's going to save him. There's his friends are in the crowd, they're going to save him. Then they start torturing him a little bit. He can recover from that. They're going to save him. Then when they start cutting his stomach open, you're like, well, this is it. This is the point of no return now. He's dying. Yeah. He knows he's dying. And that's when you start sobbing like a child if you have any heart in you. Yep. That's what they did in this real life situation. I was like, something's going to happen. There's no way they're going to do it. When I was first interviewing Katie back in January, I was like, I said it jokingly. How are you supposed to kill an ostrich? Like killing one is difficult. Right. You cut a head off a chicken, it runs around for 30 seconds. You cut the head off a 300-pound chicken, an ostrich and a lion one-on-one, it's a 50-50 fight. I said, how are they going to do it? And I said, how did they expect you to do it? Did they expect you to go up to each one and blast them in the head with a shotgun? Well, that's what they fucking did. They literally sat there on their 20-foot elevated perches and fired off 1,000 rounds to kill a couple hundred ostriches, meaning they were either very bad marksmen or they were taking a whole hell of a lot of glee in shooting these helpless, defenseless, innocent, healthy animals. And it's a stain on the country of Canada. And when I thought you couldn't have any bigger stain than COVID, and I thought you couldn't have any bigger stain than Justin Trudeau, in comes the 3 passport-carrying globalist whore, Mark J. Carney, and carries out the most awful slaughter in Canadian history of animals. Yep. I mean, it's not like residential school stuff that the Liberal government also did to the Indigenous population. Right. No, they come in and they slaughter these animals in the most horrendous, traumatizing way possible and leave their carcasses out there for the world to see. And if the world doesn't, if people do not viscerally react to this and say, fuck Canada and that Canadian government until they figure things out. They should be treated as an enemy state. Until that happens, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah,
It'll be more of this. The Liberals are going to say, govern me harder, daddy. Ooh, the government was right to do that. They were right to tax the unvaccinated. They were right to deny health care to they were right to ban the unvaccinated from flying on planes. They were right to come in, kill your innocent, healthy animals because of some administrative body, 1-year-old decision that was as based in science as is the science of a man being able to menstruate or get pregnant.
Right. Seeing those images, I was having flashbacks to the maximum absurdity and tyranny during lockdowns. I don't know if you heard the part right before we brought you on, but like I remember the culling of 3 million ferrets. And they were freaking out. I think it was Finland, but it was insane. And I think the lady who called for that culling later on was like, she broke down on air like a year later, said she was sorry, she wished she didn't do it, but they destroyed a ton of people's livelihoods who were in that business for years and years and years. It's insane to me, man. Did this family with the farm in British Columbia, were they political at all outside of like doing this, the testing with COVID? Like, was there something outside of this that made them some sort of enemy to British Columbia?
No, I think it was strictly whatever research they were doing. They had a Japanese scientist that they were working with. And it was strictly that. This was a science grab, and it was a science heist. And what's truly amazing is you get so-called Canadian conservatives, which are, I would argue, are more liberal than some American Democrats, and they say, well, they were doing research, so and they didn't comply with the initial court orders, so they really. I was like, all right, let's like, I disagree with you, and I don't think you know what you're talking about, but okay, fine. They were doing scientific research on the birds. So what?
Right.
So now, all right. So if the government says, well, you're doing scientific research, so we own your stuff. Yep. In the absence of any contract, you're arguing a point that the government never argued. The government did not argue they were doing scientific research. These had now been contaminated, and therefore, as an agreement that we had for the privilege of doing scientific research, we now have to call them. No. The government's rationale was they were infected allegedly with H5N1 in December 2024. In November 2025, they needed to be slaughtered. They could not be They could not be tested. Right. And anybody who did it would face jail time and life-crippling penalties. We get our armed Nazi Gestapo agents, the RCMP, in there with their guns, with their bulletproof vests, threatening journalists for allegedly doxing them for merely documenting what was going on. Wow. And then the RCMP said, "We're just here to keep the peace. We're not on sides. We're just here to keep the peace and let the CFIA perform the slaughter." The sniper agents didn't look like CFIA employees. Okay. If I had to guess, they might be sociopaths working at the RCMP. Wow. So it's like no, they had no political affiliation before. They were doing some research, which apparently was sufficiently valuable that it caught the eye of the CFIA, the government. And I'm thoroughly convinced, as is anybody who was following this, that they stole or smuggled out ostriches because there were not 330 dead ostriches on the ground. And until there's proof that they actually have all 330 carcasses, I should say 329 because Spirit was tortured to death earlier, that those that are missing were stolen. And then confiscating the eggs after the slaughter. They're still on the property right now. Wow. Like true terrorists. Right. They've occupied like an enemy military coming through, occupying your house, eating your food, tearing up your land, destroying your property. Yep. And when they're done, stealing and confiscating all your shit, then they move on. Yep. Like a true enemy army.
Am I insane to think that maybe 3 or 5 years from now, the Canadian government will come out and say, we found some new COVID stuff that we found in ostriches, and now we're going to sell it to you, and we'll just forget that they did this?
Oh, no, there's that. I'm sure. Hey, and Moderna discovered it. And Moderna is the pharma jab facility that I think it was $500 million. The Trudeau government gave a massive contract to Moderna. Never produced a product before the COVID jab. A massive facility outside of Montreal in a place called Laval. I have no doubt. Pfizer, Moderna, maybe Johnson & Johnson, massive discovery. What I also would have no doubt believing is that some whistleblower at the CFIA or at some pharma company or at the government that had a hand in this and knows what's going on is going to reveal that this was never about health, that this was always about stealing whatever research that farm was engaging in. Mm-hmm. And they had to brutalize and demoralize the farm and Canadians to show you have no control over your own life in Canada. Yep. You have no control over your bank accounts. The trucker convoy made that clear. You have no control over your private property. You have no control over your life, freedom, or pursuit of happiness. You are a subject of the government, and if you say a damn thing, they will come in and they will literally murder your pets. That's what the message was, and it's heard loud and clear by a lot of people.
Is there, so with the anonymous caller, they called the government agency as to whistleblow on this possible.
I don't know the details. I mean, I know what I read in the federal court judgment. It said there was an infection in late December, and an anonymous tip came into the CFIA in late December, like before anybody even knows what the hell's going on.
I'm asking because I wonder if it's possible to foil those requests. You know, maybe get some answers that way.
Look, I can tell you one thing, is that Katie, for the rest of her life, is going to be a woman on a mission.
Yeah, sure.
A woman on a lawful, righteous mission to expose and take down every POS SOB that had a hand in this.
Yeah.
Look, today there was some news that like in where was it? Kelowna, British Columbia, that feces and eggs was thrown at the Kelowna office of the CFIA. And I'm like, you're dealing with an RCMP that rejoices in beating veterans, old Indigenous, ladies. Yeah. You think they wouldn't throw shit at their own window and then say, look at what these right-wing extremists did. We got to go surveil them even more.
100%.
So I have zero doubt that it was a setup from the get-go, and that the crippling fines coming down were deliberately intended to bankrupt this farm.
Yep.
And
it's not like here in America that a Fed would plant a pipe bomb.
No, and that the government would ignore it afterward.
These things don't happen, Viva.
It's even worse, by the way. The FBI is bad. The RCMP is worse because they got a nice polite accent. Nobody would ever think they would do it terrible. But it's systemic. It's literal fascism under the definition of the word. You've got government administrative bodies that are accountable to nobody. They're not judges. They issue their own rulings. They interpret their own laws. Yep. Then you've got the court system, which is appointed by the government, which is there basically to serve the government needs. You got the RCMP, which is the armed branch of the government. You got your state-funded media, which is out there demonizing the likes of me and anybody else speaking out against this and elevating their own propagandists. And it's the quadrifecta of propaganda and state-funded tyranny. It's fascism by definition.
Yeah.
And what's just mind-blowing is the amount of so-called Canadian conservatives who don't seem to be outraged by this. They don't understand a goddamn thing, which means they haven't learned a goddamn thing from COVID because they are dense political cowards who prefer to hide their heads in the sand and say, well, what's the big deal? They're just a bunch of birds. Wait until they come for your dog.
Right.
I know cats maybe people don't care about as much. Wait until they come for you. I'm sorry about that.
Hey, now, we have a big cat audience, okay?
I can hear the crowd saying, Viva's anti-cat. Wait until they come for your animals. Wait until they say, well, your dog came back with an infected bird carcass, and now we've got to kill your dog.
Exactly.
This is Peanut the squirrel and Fred the raccoon on steroids, literally, because it's 300 if you believe the number. So it's doom pilling. I didn't think it would happen. I thought there would be a happy ending, but the story didn't have any. This is the sick realization, is that things have to get sufficiently bad for the world to get outraged. The world didn't pay attention to this until there were, couple hundred slaughtered ostrich carcasses being bulldozed around a field. That might have been the image that is required for Canada to wake up and for the world to wake up to what Canada has become. And if that's the sacrifice Katie and Universal Ostrich Farm were forced to make because they did not make it voluntarily, well, may that be the starting point, the catalyst of real change in Canada, because it's turning into a godforsaken hellhole of tyranny and subservience to the tyranny.
I hope people in power over there help Katie dismantle this stuff, but it's tough to think about it because they have no regard for, like you were saying with the beating of veterans, they have no regard for humans. I mean, the MAID program has taken off also in Canada, so people can sign up to have the government take their lives. It's like a death cult, and they're attacking everything.
It was the 5th leading cause of death in Canada. Right. Can you imagine that?
I can't. It's insane.
I call it government-assisted murder. Or government-sanctioned murder.
Legit. So I really hope they get some help. And there's no undoing this. And that is it's going to traumatize that family forever. And I hope we can help amplify that message. Viva, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the story. I think this is really, really important. I hope everyone listening right now can help amplify this, share this, everything Viva just said, share it around. The internet, for all its ills, we can really amplify a message around the world. And I know people really care about this. You've been telling people out there in the chat, have been warning me about this for quite some time. I wish this didn't happen. It's extremely disturbing. The images are disturbing. I'm not going to bring them up on the show, honestly. I really think it's disgusting. You guys can look it up. But Viva, again, thank you so much. If let people know where they can find you, they can keep up with this and everything else you're doing.
Oh, you could just, if you put in Viva Frei in the internet, you'll see everything. My real name for everybody out there is David Freiheit, so it's not a
I like
pseudonym.
Viva.
I like Viva too.
Yeah.
Well, my last name verbatim in German is Frei. It means freedom. So Angela Merkel's book Freiheit, it's my last name. But no, just you could Viva Frei. I'm on Rumble Viva Frei. And Twitter, the Viva Frei, because some Russian guy has Viva Frei, unfortunately.
Unbelievable.
But that's it. Just Google it, you'll see it. And it's people have been saying I've been obsessed. Why you keep talking about the ostriches? Look, man, I feel I did everything I could, but it just people don't appreciate just how bad it was, because it's all theoretical until there's 250 dead ostriches with bullets through them and a sobbing farm owner and. Yeah, it's all
I think this is a major landmark on the way to just furthering the tyranny with the death cult and them taking over and owning you completely. So I think people need to be paying attention to this story and stories like this. Like I'm still, worried about what was going on during COVID with the lockdowns and all these cullings with the dogs in Australia and the ferrets, and it's just insane what they're willing to do to destroy and demoralize. So I hope everyone checks out everything you're doing online, keeps up with you. Of course, I'm sure most people here already know, but thank you so much for joining us, man. I really appreciate it at this late hour.
One last thought.
Yes.
If you think what's going on in Canada is irrelevant, it is a trickling down of what's coming to America if you don't pay attention.
Yep. Totally agree, man. Totally agree. Well, have a great night, sir. Really appreciate you sharing the story, man.
Thanks
and
for
we'll
coming
talk
on.
soon.